new leader of the governing ANC party. He says his objective is to stamp out corruption and pursue a policy of radical economic transformation, which he says will also speed up expropriation of land without compensation. Now remember, this is a 65-year-old former union leader who became a businessman and now is one of South Africa's richest people. He's likely, in fact, to be the country's next president after the elections in 2019, partly because of the ANC's electoral dominance. He's promised to fight rampant corruption and revitalize the economy, and that's a message that foreign investors have loved. Ramaphosa is on record. The ANC conference had to resolve corruption, but that corruption has to be fought with the same intensity and purpose that we fight poverty, unemployment and inequality.
This conference, with overwhelming agreement, unanimous agreement, has resolved that the expropriation of land without compensation should be amongst the mechanisms available to government to give effect to land reform and redistribution. It has also been resolved that in implementing this decision, we must ensure that we do not undermine the economy, the agricultural production and food security in our country. That is what is important.
Right, and the new ANC leader, Cyril Ramaphosa there. So, let's get the latest on this. Angela Kubler joins us now live in Johannesburg with more data. Angela, perhaps I should start with a bit of historical perspective here. At the start of democratic rule, how did the ANC and the former apartheid government agree to settle the land question?
Well, Raman, when the party sat down at CODESA to thrash out the country's future, land ownership was one of the discussion points then. But most agree that it wasn't properly resolved, as we see now. But it's been argued that the ANC leaders at the time wanted general in-principle agreement and planned to use that agreement as a sort of a stepping stone or starting point to address the land ownership issues properly over time. There's also that pesky issue in the country's constitution, and it's in section 25, which protects existing property rights. And secondly, that compensation should be paid. Now, the courts are then given a third option to step in and resolve an issue between the two parties if they can't agree to sort of swap the land out for an agreed figure. So that's happened, and the EFF, of course, thought this was a great idea, and they tried to get Parliament to change the constitution. They failed then. Will a new vote, for example, lead to a different outcome when Parliament sits down next year? We'll have to wait and see. But the bottom line is an attempt was made by the EFF to get that Section 25 changed, and it failed dismally, and that's with the ANC split quite evenly at that point. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out in February. Rama?
Indeed, I'm glad you brought up the EFF, because land expropriation without compensation, nationalizing the South African Reserve Bank, the country's central bank, these are both arguments very core to the EFF, led by Julius Malema, himself formerly of the ANC. But hearing these from the ANC's conference now, what does the party gain from tacking to the hard left?
Well, from an outsider's perspective, it appears that the ANC is looking to regain some of the voters who may have drifted into the EFF camp over time, especially since Malema moved away from the ANC. On the land question, data does suggest, though, that there's been some level of success in expropriation, with the redistribution window being reopened again just recently to include some additional land claims. It appears, though, as an aside from some other data sources, that the government is one of the largest landowners in the country. Then, of course, some suggest that the country's demographics have also changed, and there's been an increased urbanization drive, which has meant that farmland isn't as sought after as it once might have been. On the nationalization of the SARB, of course, well, the Reserve Bank governor came out and booted that idea into touch quite firmly. But it does appear that this is about voting, votes, and an anxiety within the ANC for those elections in 2019, and that majority that they're currently sitting on, Rama.
Indeed. So, again, from an outsider's perspective, the rest of us would say, but apartheid ended over 2 decades ago. So why have successive governments in South Africa failed to decisively settle this land issue?
Well, there is a perception among some that the government has in fact failed to deal with this land issue. It's true to some extent, I'm told. In 2011, for example, we heard that the target was to give 40% of the country's commercial farmland to black people by 2014. That was set back by a decade, so that was 2024 when they expect to reach that target. And there were a range of reasons given for that. There were also questions raised then about how the government was going to fund the $3 billion needed to pay farmers to sell their land. As it stands right now, there's some 3 million hectares of land has been transferred into black owners' hands through this land redistribution or restitution project. But 90% of those beneficiaries took the money, which cost the government over time some $600 million. Land ownership, of course, is an emotive issue, and already today we've seen lots of talk from lots of agricultural groupings saying that they're going to be taking this to court and fight it if there's land taken away without compensation because of the constitutional issues. So there are lots of legal challenges that are coming in there. In his maiden speech yesterday, as you heard, President Ramaphosa, I've got to get used to that one, said that expropriation without compensation was only one of the tools that the ANC could use. So it seems like he's leaving a little bit of room for negotiation on that topic, Raman.
Indeed, and certainly something we need to drill down into a little deeper. But last question for you, Angelo. How seriously should we outsiders looking at investing in South Africa, how seriously should we take this resolution to nationalize the central bank? Or put another way, what problem does nationalizing the SARB solve?
Well, the SARB, or the Reserve Bank, issued a statement late this afternoon, and they're saying that any nationalization will be cosmetic only. It won't affect the mandate of the central bank or the way that it operates. And it won't solve any problem, whether it's perceived or otherwise. It would, in fact, according to SARB, raise the level of risk and uncertainty in terms of the financial situation in the country and a policy, a bit of tension there. So the SARB says that the bank has confirmed that shareholders have no influence on policy decisions either. That's the preserve of the governor and his board of deputies, and those people are appointed by the president. Added to which, the act of buying out the 660 odd shareholders would actually be very expensive, as many wouldn't sell out at a loss, which it's currently sitting at right now, because they're getting a dividend of 10 cents per share per annum, and a lot of them are sitting with around, I don't know, 10,000 to 20,000 shares in their back pockets. So it's likely that any attempt by the ANC to get this nationalization of the bank, the central bank, happening will also get booted into touch. Raman?
Indeed. We'll have to see how all this plays out. Angela Kopla in Johannesburg. Thank you.